century already started all with war in Russia. And then World War I, they had internal turmoil, they were defeated. 1917, Bolshevik Revolution started, which was the ideology of equality, which is utopian society, which was the base for communism. Now, the first leader under communist society was basically Lenin. And then it starts from here. Lenin, probably you guys have heard about that, right?
Yeah.
At least the name of Lenin, Stalin. Malenkov was very, very short. Khrushchev was longer. Brezhnev, this was very short. Let me go, which ones we're going to talk about here. We'll be talking about Brezhnev and Gorbachev, which was the last one under communist society, right? Gorbachev was the one that communism collapsed and he resigned, basically. But it started with Lenin. The ideology started with communism society, started with Lenin. Now, if you guys remember, or probably not remember, this was the flag of Soviet Union, USSR, Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. This was the flag of Soviet Union. This is the flag of Russia right now. So Caesar rules for almost 400 years until 1917, which was the time that Bolshevik Revolution happened. In 1917, centralized communist government took over. Remember, we said one party, and it will be Communist Party, and everything is centralized. All the economic resources are centralized and divided. For example, it's only one bank, and that's a state bank. It's only one store, and that's not one store, but just one brand of store, for example, which is state stores. So the housings, food, everything is provided by states, so all resources are provided by states. It's called central government. For 5 years, 4 socialist republics were established. The Russian, Transcaucasian Soviet Federated Socialist Republics, Ukrainian, Belarusian Soviet Socialist Republics. Let me show you how it worked. And at the end, we're going to talk about why, in reality, Soviet Union or communism collapsed. Here, this is a good one. Number 1 shows Russia. Number 2, Ukraine. 3, Belarus. 4, Uzbekistan. 5, Kazakhstan. 6, Georgia. 7, Azerbaijan. 8, Lithuania. 9, Moldova. 10, Latvia. 11, Kyrgyzstan, or Kyrgyzstan, or the Republic of Kyrgyz. 12, Tajikistan. 13, Armenia. 14, Turkmenistan. And 15, Estonia. Now, you see how broad the map is, right? Why is not including this one? Well, I have to look at another map because. Okay, no, I'm sorry. This is not. This is Mongolia. It's way far. I thought this is this far. No, this is Iran. So this is Mongolia. This is China. Now. So look at this map and see how wide it goes from Europe, right, all the way to the most eastern part of East, right, because this is China. It actually goes the other side of China. That's how east it goes, all the way to Europe. Now, countries that all go, the end of it is Istan, those were part of Iran or Persian Empire. Istan means the land of, right? So, because we're going to go at the end to say the result why the country would collapse, it's very important for you to know that how many different countries, independent countries, Russia took over. Now, Iran actually, all those Istans, which is this part and this part, were part of Iran. Besides Istans, Armenia, and which is Armenia and Azerbaijan and Armenia were also part of Iran too. Now, I am Irani Azeri, okay? So Iran is a very ethnically diverse country, very ethnically diverse country. When you say Persian, probably it's not the good word to include me because Persians are it's an ethnic group. You see what I'm saying? So the country, when it was called Persia, it was called based on ethnic group, which actually the country included very diverse ethnic groups. Kurds, us, Arabs in the south, Baluch on the east, southeast. So we have a lot of different ethnic groups. So when it calls Iran, I am actually Irani Azeri, which is part of here, right? So for 70 years, they haven't, still today, just a couple days ago, one of my cousins posted a history of his grandmother that was from Georgia. So the DNA, just like today we're understanding, because we were like the generations, we didn't know what's going on. So our grandparents are all born here. Irani Azeri's grandparents are all born here because it was before 1970. But the parents, for example, my dad, 1938, he was born here inside what is called Iran today, right? Iran's name was changed 1938. So it was before that was Persia, which included all of these. It's still today, just the DNA reveals that Irani Azeris have mutual DNA in common with Georgians. With Georgians, which one's Georgia? It must be somewhere here. Georgia is, let me see, six is Georgia, okay. 13 is Armenia, okay. It's Georgia. Irani Azeris have, because Azerbaijan is here, Irani Azeris have more in common with Georgians than with the rest of Iranians. And Armenians. And Iranians actually have more in common with Azeris of Russia, Azerbaijan part. It's very weird. So we're here, right? We're northwest of Iran. We're here. We have more in common in DNA with Armenia and Georgia, and Azeris, Russia Azeris, have more in common with the rest of Persians, basically the Farsi ethnic groups. So, and it's still today, we're figuring out where are we from. We don't know. We know that we're Irani Azeris, and our features are very different than the rest of Iranians. So in Iran, like in a school or anything, they would, by my features, they would know that I am Irani Azeri, which is one of the largest minorities in Iran. It's like about 1/3 of Iranians are Irani Azeris, 1/3, and then the rest of them are many different diversity of minorities. So look at the differences in cultures. Russia, all these South Asians, this is completely Asian. Kazakhstan is very, very Asian. They look Asian. Their culture is Asian. However, they're a very huge Muslim ethnic group. Here, these are Muslims, and these two are Muslims too. And that's why we were replaced. Because when Russia took over Bolshevik, they didn't want ethnic minorities to practice their religions. But because these people were Muslims, they started going down to south, which is Iraq. So based on all that, at the end of your chapter, it tells you everything. It outlines like the food shortage, control over lives, economic shortfall, everything it can count for you. It says none of them was as important as the ethnic diversity that were controlled. They could not speak their own language. They could not practice their religion. So the complete cleansing of their own culture was happening, right? So that was the main result, that after 70 years, the communism could not survive because people were extremely diverse. Your book actually says 90 different ethnic groups were included in Russia. 90 different. One of the factors, components of Russia or Soviet Union communism was Russification. It calls Russification. Russification included, like, everybody has to speak Russian, everybody has to basically, nobody practices any particular religion at all, there's no religion practice in the country. And the names must be Russian names. For example, you guys probably have heard a lot Ibrahimov, Mohammedov. Those are the ones that are Muslims. At the time of Russification, they had to add OV at the end, OV at the end, because of Russification, for the last names to sound Russian last names. So that was called a plan of Russification. After the collapse of Soviet Union, when they became independent countries, their basically government started de-Russification. So now one by one people can actually take their birth certificates and remove that OV from the end of their last names, one by one. A lot of people did, some of them didn't, but basically it takes generations to remove all those last names. So that was one of the main factors of why Soviet Union collapsed, because of ethnic diversity and the excessive control. You cannot practice your religion, you cannot speak your language. So now, let's go back here. Belarusians, Ukrainians, Lithuania, Latvia, they were most Europeans. And then you saw the Asians and then Muslims in the south. On December 30th, 1922, the Constituent Republics established the USSR, Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. So 1917, Bolshevik took over, Communist Party was established. And then when they started taking over the small independent states, they established Soviet Union, the whole union, because all those small republics were included as well. So this happened December 30th, 1922. And it lasted for about 7 years, exactly 69 years. But from the utopian society that was once promised, remember we talked last chapter, it was far away from that utopian society. Because remember we talked also about a nomenclatura, that was an elite system that established little by little, and then they could see the class differences. If you're part of the government, you have access to better universities, you can go to outside of the country, you can travel abroad. So that was actually a class-oriented society too, which was not promised. It was promised based on utopian society, which shouldn't be any class based on class. In December 1991, 25th, 1991, the Soviet hammer and sickle flag lowered for the last time over the Kremlin. Kremlin is their White House. Thereafter, replaced by the Russian tricolor. Earlier in the day, Mikhail Gorbachev resigned his post as president of the Soviet Union, leaving Boris Yeltsin as president of the newly independent Russian state. Now, Mikhail Gorbachev, I don't know if you guys have seen him or not, his picture, but he was famous for the map of the world that was in his forehead. So he basically shaped the world, everybody says. He received Nobel Peace Prize in 1990, and the reason was because he opened up after, which we're going to talk one by one what happened throughout those 7 years. He was the last one of the leader of Communist Party, right? So the last leader of Communist Party, he was the only one that opened up the society a little bit. So he allowed media to be a little bit more open, less censorship. He started basically reducing the budget for military and focusing on other areas too, which was too late, it didn't happen. But he was not forcing. So he was not basically, because under Brezhnev, you will see a lot of people, they killed like about 20 million people. But he was not that type, so he wouldn't kill people. He just gave a more open society, and people basically started coup, which was one was unsuccessful, but the next one was successful. That's why he basically resigned. Now, the Nobel Peace Prize that was given to him, it was because it was expected a third World War. The whole world was waiting for World War III. So it was believed at the time that Mikhail Gorbachev was one that prevented World War III from happening, because he resigned and he admitted that communism was a failure, and he let the country collapse. By the collapse of communism and openness of the whole Eastern Bloc and Russia, Soviet Union at the time, the chances of World War III started reducing down. So because of that, and that was his reason to resign. he didn't want to continue. He could have, by force, just like his predecessors, continue, but he knew it's going to lead to a third world war. So therefore, he resigned. That's why he received the Nobel Peace Prize.
Well, things would have been really different last time.
Very. The rise of communism in Russia. Now, from 1914 to 1918, we talked about it with World War I, and Russia was defeated. Russo-Japanese War in had a major war in 1904, and then again 1905. Workers demanded better working conditions. They had internal turmoils. That's why when World War I started, Russia was already defeated. Now, while World War I was going on, between 1914 to 1918, 1917 Russia has its own internal problems, which was Bolshevik Revolution. Now, these are the allies of the World War I. Mainly Britain, France, US won World War I, which happened from 1914 to 1919. Germany was the main loser, along with Austria-Hungary and Ottoman Empire, and the Central Power, and also Russia. Also, Russia withdrew from the war early due to its civil war issues at home that they had. Now, I don't know how much you guys know about the Ottoman Empire. Ottoman Empire, basically, if you ask Palestinians today, probably you guys have heard about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, right? I think everybody should know. If you ask Palestinians, they believe that Ottoman Empire, they really like actually Ottoman Empire. They believe the collapse of Ottoman Empire after World War I was one of the results that the region became very unstable and all these issues started. Jews could move in, and the collapse of the state of, well, Palestine was basically under British control. And then after that, Ottoman Empire. So when Ottoman Empire loses, World War I leaves, and British take control, and then under British control, Jews can basically move into their own country, to the land. So therefore, they will look, Ottoman Empire is very, very important for that part of the world, for them, and the history of it, which is all the Turkey, about Turkey, you can say Jordan, Palestine is today's Israel. What part are there? That part, like about Syria, part of Syria. All of those parts were part of Ottoman empires. The Russian Revolution, March 17, a series of riots took place over food shortage. We talked about it since the Bolshevik era. Soldiers sent to suppress the strikes joined the strikers. Caesar resigned, but proved to be ineffective. Soviet Council of Workers and soldiers' deputies were formed. These are all the start of the communism, 1917, under Bolshevik. In October 1917, the Bolsheviks, led by Lenin, seized power. Bolsheviks are the ones that basically, I told you guys, that led the Muslim Azerbaijanis to the south and Georgians to the south. Bolshevik time, if you still talk to my dad, he says like how his mom was telling about Bolshevik time. So they're still, my grandparents' generation, they're still talking about Bolshevik time because it was the time of communism. So they started literally massacring people, ethnic minorities. So that's why ethnic minorities had to move toward the south. So grandparents and great-grandparents are all born in the other side of the border, and then we're all born in the lower side of the border, which is current Iran. Lenin and communism. Now, the first leader of the established communism Soviet Union was Lenin. In 1918, the Bolshevik formally formed the Communist Party and ruled the Soviet Union for 74 years. All lands were declared the property of the state. Remember, one central government, right? Industrial and commercial enterprises were given to committees selected by workers. An important characteristic of the former Soviet Union was the formation of dual party, Communist Party, and government administrative structure. It's not dual party, it's dual structure, okay? So it's Communist Party and the government administrative, but it's all under one political system of communist system. just a timeline here again. Under Lenin, these are all under Lenin. So what he did, he basically started reforming the country. He tried to move towards the utopian ideology. So therefore, he started implementing a couple economic development plans. The first new economic policy, 1921 to 1928. In March 29, government controlled large-scale economic activities such as transportation, banking, foreign trade. Small enterprises still existed at Lenin time. Peasants were allowed to sell their surplus grain at market price. So it was not 100% the communism that we know today, right? But this is all Lenin's time. Small businesses returned to their former owners. Forced labor was abolished. Money wages were adopted. Central government implemented plans to attract foreign investors. Agriculture production increased. The NEP, which is New Economic Policy, was quite successful. But Lenin died in 1924. So Lenin's policy actually proved to be much better than the latecomers, which we're going to talk about Stalin. Now, Lenin died after Lenin. Stalin, in Lenin's time, because he took over after Bolshevik, the country was a mess. So he started improving the country. After Lenin died, Stalin took over, which was the time that the oppression of the communist parties that we know today. That started from Stalin. Lenin died in January 21st, 1924. Upon Lenin's death, Stalin was officially hailed as a successor, as a leader of the ruling Communist Party. Collectivized agriculture. So remember, we said under Lenin, they could actually have small farmers could sell their grains, the surplus grains in the market, right? He started the five-year plan, couple five-year plans Stalin started. The first one, all resources converted to industrial production with priorities given to production of steel, and it was because of military. He completely neglected agriculture. The second five-year plan focused heavily on industry production, particularly steel again. Farmers did not own land, so he was the one who took lands from the farmers. Always shortage of the consumer goods was considered necessary in order to build Soviet Union. So whatever pressure was on people, he considered that to be part of basically utopian society. Because you want such a good society, you have to pay, there is a cost for that. You pay the cost for it, but in the future it'll be good. 20 million Russians lost their lives in the 1930s under Stalin. Later on, remember we said at Mikhail Gorbachev's time, he opened up the media. People figured out at that time, literally 70 years later, that how many people died under Stalin. And the ones that didn't, for example, military personnel that didn't want to obey his rules, they were either killed or sent to Siberia, and they would die in Siberia under severe conditions over there in Siberia. Stalin infamous purges. 20 million Russians lost their lives in the 1930s, mostly leading Communist Party members and millions of ordinary citizens. No one was protected under Stalin's leadership. A system of terror was implemented by secret police. Many were dead and many deported to Siberia. And they died over there under the conditions in Siberia.
Like to freeze? Because it's so cold?
Freezing, and also, there was no agriculture, nothing would be provided to them. So they had to survive over there. And again, all of these information was revealed later, 70 years later. Nobody knew about it. The Soviet Union after World War II. Now, World War II started in late 1930s and then lasted until 1945. Soviet became one of the two major military after World War II was done. So what happened? World was completely bipolar, right? Either Western under United States or Eastern under, or communism ideology under Soviet Union influence. Soviet Union became one of the two major military superpowers after the end of World War II, a position it maintained until 1911. I'm sorry, that's not 1911, it's 1991. I have to correct that one. I will correct it when I post it there. Until 1991. It extended its economic and political power over the Eastern and Central European countries of Poland, Romania, Bulgaria, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, and East Germany. Now, let me show you this map here. Map of former former Eastern Bloc.
Gracias. Thank you.
Now, Russia, as you see, if you look here, this were all part of Soviet Union itself, right? All of these here were Soviet Union. Now, it actually extended its influence to here as well. Poland, can't even see here, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, and this is East Germany. Remember we talked about East Germany, I guess, right? So now, after the collapse of Soviet Union, all these countries also started collapsing. Yugoslavia and Czechoslovakia. Czechoslovakia is Czech and Slovakia, right? And then Yugoslavia was divided into 7 different countries. The problem was that when Soviet Union started taking over all these, influence all these countries, again the same thing happened. Very diverse ethnic minorities, he forced them basically to be ruled under communism society, which was the same thing. Not speaking your own language, not practicing your own religion. I don't know if you guys remember the civil war of Bosnia and Herzegovina through Serbs, probably not. It was in early 1990s. That was exactly the time the Soviet Union collapsed. That was the time that Yugoslavia, which is Bosnia and Herzegovina, Serbistan, all those countries, they started their own internal civil wars because of ethnic diversity or ethnic minorities that they had in the country. So right now, also those countries that we just named here, this is 7 countries and this is 2 countries. And your first lady is from Yugoslavia. And her dad was actually a secret agent for actually Communist Party. He was an active high-ranking member of the Communist Party. Yeah, her dad, which is, he's still alive. And they actually, a couple years, like I think 1 year ago, they said that her parents came to the United States. So,
I remember that.
yeah. All countries followed Soviet economic plans, specifically focused on state production, focused on industrialization of large-scale industries. Now, the post-Stalin period. Stalin died in 1953 and left a mixed legacy. Industrialized the USSR, but at the cost of society, because he killed a lot of people, society became poor. Nikita Khrushchev was replaced in 1953 to 1964. More decentralized policies. Now, he's going to open up a little bit. More decentralized. Remember, Stalin did it very, very centralized. Now, he's going to decentralize it a little bit. Sovnarkhozy was introduced by Nikita Khrushchev in May 1957 in an attempt to combat. What was Sovnarkhozy was basically means the same, decentralization, like to give more authority to smaller, combat the centralization and departmentalism of ministries. Focus was still on industrialization of heavy industries. However, life has improved. So if you see Lenin, Stalin, Khrushchev, all of them actually are still different policies, but they're still focusing on steel, which is military power, improving their military power. Khrushchev was deposed by the party in 1964 and replaced by Brezhnev. Now, as soon as they're opening up a little bit, decentralization, they'll be deposed by the Communist Party, right? So he was short-lived too, and then they basically replaced it by Brezhnev. Brezhnev was just like Stalin too again. Brezhnev doctrine was born, which was invasion of Czechoslovakia and Afghanistan. So Afghanistan is this country here. So basically, Afghanistan's culture, Afghanistan is this one here, right? So they believed if they could invade, for example, all these Islam countries, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, all of those countries, why not Afghanistan? Because they were exactly almost the same culture. Muslim practicing, but they're actually very Asian-looking Muslims. They're like almost 100% Asian-looking, but Muslims. So
Yugoslavia. Or
no, Afghanistan. So their natives are completely Asian. So they actually Brezhnev, he believed that now that they could take over all those Stan countries, now let's go down towards Afghanistan too. So he started basically, that was the Brezhnev doctrine, to start invading all the countries, surrounding countries, which was including Czechoslovakia and Afghanistan. Living standard improved for the masses and especially for the nomenclatura, the elite group of people. Emphasize on the development of the agriculture, particularly in the area of livestock production. Soviet grain imports increased from 600,000 tons in 1969 to 46 million tons in 1981. Brezhnev died in 1982. However, a lot of people died under Brezhnev as well. But Stalin basically was one of the cruelest of their leaders. Yuri Andropov took office and he died 1984. Konstantin Chernenko took office and died 1985. So in the 1980s, they actually, 82 he died, 84 the other one died, and then 85 the other one. So in 1980s, it became very, very unstable until 1980s showed a drop in economic growth because of the changes in the office, lagged further behind the West technology, particularly in the production of computers. Now, it was in the 80s that they have noticed that they fell behind the rest of the world tremendously. They have focused so much on their military power that they completely neglected any other industry. Now, when the rest of the world, for example, Japan and United States, in the 80s, they were booming as far as technological advancement, automobile, electronics, computers, Soviet Union lagged far behind them because all the focus was on military power. Now, the problem was that the income of the country, whatever it was, it would go only towards militarization. And they could not survive longer. Because in the United States, it was a portion of our GDP, right? So you basically dedicate a portion, contribute a portion of your GDP to military. But in Soviet Union, it was more than half that was going only towards military. And people, 290 million people were suffering from shortage of food and everything, all other consumer goods, because only the focus was on military. And they knew at that time, in 1980s, they knew they cannot survive that way. One of the reasons that is believed that Mikhail Gorbachev actually, he conceded, basically, he resigned, was because he knew their military power fell far behind